Homeownership was supposed to be peaceful, a place to enjoy the fruits of hard work, quite literally in my case. I took pride in my small backyard garden, growing fresh vegetables, especially my tomatoes, big, red, and perfectly ripe. It wasn't just a hobby, it was something I genuinely enjoyed. But apparently, I wasn't the only one. At first, it was subtle. A missing tomato here and there. I assumed it was an animal, maybe a squirrel or a raccoon. But then, it became obvious. The best, ripest tomatoes disappeared overnight, while the unripe ones remained untouched. Someone was picking them deliberately. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe it was a misunderstanding. A neighbor's kid grabbing one out of curiosity? An accident? But when it kept happening day after day, week after week, it became clear. Someone was stealing from my yard. I started paying closer attention, keeping track of the ripening process. If I noticed a tomato about to reach peak perfection, I'd check on it the next morning. And every time, it would be gone. Whoever was doing this had a good eye for quality. Then came the HOA meeting. I brought up the theft casually, half expecting others to chime in with similar experiences. Instead, there was silence, until Karen spoke up. "Oh, come on," she said with a forced laugh. "Who would even steal tomatoes? That's ridiculous." Something about the way she dismissed it so quickly rubbed me the wrong way. No one had accused anyone yet, but she was already defending the hypothetical thief. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, the type who thrived on enforcing arbitrary rules while bending them for herself. She monitored lawns, reported minor infractions, and made sure everyone knew she was in charge. I let it go that night, but I paid closer attention to her after that. And soon enough, the pattern became obvious. Every time I saw Karen out for one of her power walks, always early in the morning, always alone, I would find fresh tomatoes, missing that same day. That was all the confirmation I needed. I could have confronted her. I could have called her out. But knowing Karen, she would deny everything, twist the story, maybe even try to get me in trouble with the HOA for false accusations or some nonsense. No, I needed something undeniable. Proof. And more than that, I wanted her to learn a lesson. So I got an idea. A perfect, fiery, genius idea. I went online that night and placed an order. A new plant. Something special. Something that looked just like a tomato at a glance, but would leave a lasting impression on anyone foolish enough to steal it. Karen had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I checked the camera footage. There she was, Karen, creeping into my yard like she owned the place. She didn't even hesitate. With the confidence of someone who had done this 100 times before, she reached for the ripest, juiciest tomatoes in sight. My Carolina Reapers. She plucked two, examined them for a second, then slipped them into her pocket. Not even a glance around to see if anyone was watching. She had gotten so comfortable stealing from me that she didn't even bother being discreet anymore. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Karen, being Karen, couldn't resist sampling the goods immediately. She popped one into her mouth as she strolled down the sidewalk, probably expecting the same sweet burst of tomato juice she'd stolen so many times before. The reaction was instant. She froze mid-step. Her posture stiffened as if her entire body had just been electrified. Then, her hand shot up to her mouth. The chewing stopped. A second later, the full force of the Carolina Reaper hit her, and she gagged. She spat it out onto the pavement, but it was too late. The oil from the pepper had already coated her tongue and throat, igniting a fire she had no way of extinguishing. She clutched her face, her breathing ragged as she stumbled forward. I could see the panic setting in, her brain registering that this wasn't just a little spicy. This was an inferno. Karen started coughing violently, fanning her mouth as if that would help. Then, in pure desperation, she reached for the second tomato in her pocket, probably thinking she had grabbed a bad one. I watched in absolute disbelief as she took another bite. That was when she lost it. She doubled over, clutching her stomach, her whole body convulsing. Her face turned bright red, sweat pouring down her forehead. She stumbled toward a neighbor's lawn and grabbed their garden hose, fumbling with the nozzle before finally spraying water directly into her mouth. It didn't help. If anything, it made it worse. The capsaicin from the Reaper was oil-based and water just spread it around. Karen dropped the hose and started pacing in frantic circles, her hands shaking, eyes wide with horror. The best part? It was all on camera. Every single moment. The entitled sneaking, the confident theft, the cocky bite, and the spectacular meltdown that followed. Eventually, she gave up on trying to fix it herself and ran home, still clutching her face like it was going to melt off. I sat back, watching the footage with the biggest grin on my face. It was everything I had hoped for, and more. Karen had spent months stealing from me, completely convinced she would never face consequences.
But now?
Now she knew.